So yesterday when we were working on the Croqui figure, we were learning techniques with our watercolor. We were learning how to blend. We were learning how to create gradients and how to work from dark to medium to light using watercolors, right? And then we also learned what we see over here with this sphere is how to create something that is two-dimensional and flat and turn it into a three-dimensional object, right? So the first thing that we had to be aware of is where our light source is coming from, because we know opposite our light is our shadow, right? Okay, so we're going to practice one more sphere. Let's just do it together now that we're all starting at the same time. So draw another circle. This time I'm going to change the direction that my lighting is coming from. Mine's going to come from the upper right-hand corner. And just like we learned yesterday, we want to set up our palettes by taking colors from what's called the cakes. So I'm going to start with my red that I was working with yesterday. I'm saturating the red on my brush because that's going to be my darkest color. So whatever your darkest color is, that's what you're going to saturate on your brush right now. And as we remember, you can use the plastic cover of your watercolor palette as your mixing surface. That's your palette surface. Okay, now I'm going to take my second color, my orange. I'm saturating that. I'm going to make a separate section for my orange on my palette. Do you remember the protocol of what you're supposed to do before you dip your brush in a new cake color? You rinse it off. Why do we do that? So the colors don't mix. That's right. We keep our colors nice and pure that way. So always remember to rinse your brush in between. Super important. Okay, and as a third color, I'm going to go right into my yellow. There we go. Gotta get some more water going. Tapping my colors. Okay, so just to start, here we go. I'm going to start with my darkest hue, which is the red. And so my light source is coming from the upper right, so my shadow is going to fall on the bottom left. And we also talked about something else yesterday. We talked about the direction of your brush strokes, of your paint strokes. Why is it so important to be aware of the direction that your brush strokes are going? Why is that key? What do you think? Okay, so we know that it's key because depending on the form of the object, like this is a circle that we're trying to create the illusion, it's a three-dimensional sphere. We want our brush strokes to mimic the shape of that form, so we want it to appear rounded. So I'm not just going to paint lines directly across the sphere. It's going to make it look flat. I don't want this to look flat. I want it to have dimension. So that's why I'm rounding out my strokes. So I started with my red. I'm already going to venture into my orange. Okay, working my way with my orange. And as I get towards my light source, what am I going to do with my color? What? What do we do? What's the technique? Well, first, what should happen? Is it or lighter my color as I go towards my light source? Lighter. So how do we make it lighter with watercolor? Add more water. Very good. So we definitely want to make sure that there's more water than pigment on the brush as we work our way up. See? And you can even just use the water to spread out your color too. Okay, I'm going to work right into my yellow at this point. And when I work with these colors, I'm always blending into that previous color as well. So my orange and my yellow are going to meet. They're going to mix with each other as I work my way up. And I'm still keeping that curvature going. And I will go a little bit up here with my yellow. Okay, so as I'm going towards my light source, what do you think? Do I cover up my white entirely? No. Why do we not do that? It's the highlight. Also, the purest white you're ever going to get is the white of the page itself. So that's the thing with watercolor. We always want to leave the white of the page. It's so important as your highlight, because that's how it's going to have the most contrast and pop, is by having that bright, vibrant white. But what I am doing, you're noticing, is I'm going to spread thin my yellow as light as I possibly can. I'm really adding a lot of water right now to it. Almost entirely water, almost no pigment, just to spread it so thin that it blends perfectly into that white. Okay? And there we go. We have our sphere. And as this dries, you can always go back in. You can always touch things up. Like maybe I want my red to be a bit darker and like a bit deeper at the bottom, because I want my darks to have more pop and more contrast. So I'm going right into the red. Okay. And then you can always blend further. Sometimes I add a little bit of water just to blend. Usually you don't even always need to add any pigment or paint to do that. Okay, so we're going to finish up these spheres. Let's take a look. Okay, everyone hold up your spheres. Let me see how you're doing. Ooh, look around at each other. Very nicely done. Very nice. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to the Croqui figure. Are you ready? Okay, take your sphere page away. Get your Croqui figure out, because the same principles are going to follow on the Croqui figure as the sphere. Okay, so from yesterday...
Should I rip out the Croqui figure? Because it's in the same...
It's up to you. You can do that. Yeah, you know what? I would do that so that it's not mixing with your pattern, right? Yeah. Okay, so when we're looking at our Croqui figure, the first thing that we have to establish is the light source. So yesterday, for me, I decided that my light source was going to come from the upper right-hand corner. So as we go down the figure, all of my shadows are going to fall to the left, right? Just call out the answers. I want to hear from all of you. Okay, so we're going to create a skin tone, a flesh tone. So ultimately, you can choose any color that you want. It really doesn't matter. Today, I'm going to go with some more naturalistic hues. Even though it could be really fun to paint our figure green, if you really want to, go right ahead. But I want to practice doing natural flesh tones with the watercolors. So on my particular palette, I have browns, I have all different types of yellows and oranges. And if you wanted, you could go into any of these colors directly and sort of just use that on its own. Or if you want like a specific skin tone, you can mix and blend any color combination that you want. What I suggest to you is if you're making your own color concoction, you can actually just mix a large amount of it into your palette so that when you're dipping, you know, you have a lot of that color to use and you don't run out of it. Okay, does that make sense for everyone? So just for demo purposes, let's see. This color on my palette, it's more like a burnt sienna. It's like a rusty kind of brown color. It's very pretty, kind of cinnamony. I'm going to start to mix a large amount of that on my palette just to get started. And similar to what we did with the spheres, the way like lighting hits the body, you can also pick 3 different hues to work with and to mix along the way, as one could be dark, one could be mid-tone, one can be light. because that's what happens when lighting hits the body. Okay, so I'm going to go for this burnt sienna color. Let's see, what else can I mix in? I might also add some yellow just for fun. I'll warm up that hue a little bit. Okay, I think I'm just going to go with that for now. Okay, so which part of the body do we start with? What makes the most sense? Which part of the body? Think about when we did the traditionally shaded figure, right? With the colored pencil. The head, right? Why do we start with the head? Why does that make the most sense? What do you think? And I'd like to hear from my students at home as well. You can call it the answers. Why the head? Why is it the easiest, most obvious place to start?
Because its sphere is also closest to the light source.
Very good. Okay, Marina, that was beautifully said. I'm going to repeat what she said. So we compare it to an egg shape, and it reacts the same way that the spheres do. And it's closest to our light source, right? So the head is going to dictate everything else. So let's start with our head. Okay, get a little bit of pigment on the brush. And I'm not going to oversaturate it right now. But we're going to start with the face, and we're going to just layer some of that paint right down the shadowed side of the face. We're treating it just like we would a sphere. You'll notice that I'm working with the curvature of that face, working my way around. And do you also notice what kind of brush that I'm using? What do you notice about my brush?
Really big. Is that okay?
So do you have a rounded one like this? Here, I'm going to give you one.
Home, but
Here. Use this instead. So I'm pointing out the type of brush to use because that's equally important.
thank you.
Yeah, come on over. Okay, this is also important. So it's the type of brush that you need, the right brush for the job. So why do you think it's really smart to use a rounded brush, like a pointed brush as well, for doing the Croqui figure, for doing the body? Why does that make sense as opposed to a flat brush? So that's one reason. So Marina said because it's thinner at the top and you can be more precise, right? That's one reason. The other thing is the body like rectangular, or is the form rounded? What do you think? It's rounded, right? So it makes sense to use a rounded brush for a rounded object or a rounded form, right? That's why we're doing it. How it had to like block in like a lot of background or something that was rectangular and geometric that way, then it would make sense to use a rectangular brush, right? Or a squared off brush. So that's half the battle, is having the right brush. Okay, I'll wipe this down a little bit. See, I just made a little mistake here. So I went a little too dark with my color, but you can always blot it. Not a big deal. And I'm just going to wet this and bring my color down a bit. Okay, I already want to start to get lighter, so I'm not even going to add any more pigment to my brush, but what I am going to do is just start to add some water, and I'm going to go lighter as I get towards my light source. Now, my particular Croqui figure has features on the face, so I am going to just fill those in a bit. And I'm going to work my way down the bridge of the nose. Okay, just like that. And how many of you knew that the bridge of the nose actually starts underneath the eyebrow? Did anyone know that? Well, you will know this now. Watch what I'm going to do. From the bridge of the nose, underneath the eyebrow, I'm going to go straight over there. And then I'm going to go right across the eyelid. I'm actually going to do that on both sides. And I like to go sometimes a little more intense on the eyelids because it almost looks like an eyeshadow. Isn't it pretty? It's like a little more dramatic. I'm also going to bring a little bit of shadow underneath the hairline. Why am I doing that? Why would I put shadow where the hairline is?
Because technically it's not like flat to the face, but lifted, so it will create a shadow.
Very good. So the hair is not flat to the face. It slightly overlaps it, right? We've talked about when an object overlaps another object, it creates a cast shadow, even if it's slight. So I am going to darken that area a little bit. The upper lip, I'm going to fill in a little darker because the upper lip always has more of a shadow to it, which we'll talk about at a later time when we study faces. But there is more shadowing there. And at the bottom of the lower lip, I'm going to create the illusion of poutiness because there is a little shadow that will happen at the bottom. But did you notice that I didn't totally cover up the white of my page where that little highlight is on the lip? I didn't cover it, okay, because I want it to pop. And then also, we want to fill in the ears. Don't forget about those ears. Closer to the head, you're going to have more shadow on those ears because the face itself will cast shadow onto it as well. Okay? You might have also noticed that I'm curving all of my lines, curving all my shadows. I don't want them to be too sharp either. And I am going to put a little bit of shadow. I'm going very delicately over here at the nostril area. Okay, because there is going to be shadowing underneath the nose. You see, I went very gently over there. And I'm also going to work into the cheekbones a little bit, almost like blush. Okay, still leaving white of the page. Okay, so after we move on from the face, what is the next part of the body that we need to focus on? The neck. Okay, what is the basic shape of the neck? It's a cylinder, and my light source is on the right. I'm going to make my darkest portion on the left, right? And this time, you know what? I'm not even just going to stop at the neck. I'm going to drag that line all the way down my figure. Where the bust is, there's going to be cast shadow underneath to that arm. I'm just working my way down as I see it. And now I'm going to extend that color from the neck. I want to get lighter as I go towards my light source. I pretty much just am only using water at this point on my brush as I go towards my light source. I don't need more pigment. And you'll notice that I kind of stopped at that collarbone area. Okay. The collarbone itself, remember it dips in that bone, it does get more shadow to it. So I'm going to enhance the shadow in there. And then I'm going to also start to work my way down to the torso and the bust area. So the bust itself has dimension to it, and it's going to cast a shadow underneath onto the torso. The torso is like the bust all the way down to that hip. And the torso is what shape? What can we compare it to? What kind of three-dimensional shape? What do you think? Okay, did I hear someone? Okay. So we can sort of compare it to a cylinder, right? It's also very hourglassy. So it goes wider to more narrow, right above the belly button.
You're only using water to spread it?
I'm really just using water to spread it, yes.
Because mine, like when I do that, it just like...
It's because of the paper that you were using. Yeah, I'm telling, because marker paper is not meant for the watercolor. It's not going to handle it. Watercolor paper actually absorbs. Yes. That's why you were struggling. Okay, I'm also getting a cast shadow right where that underwear line is, because remember, clothing is going to overlap the body as well. And you'll notice, watch, I'm going to curve my shadow up. I don't just stop abruptly like a square. Do you guys see that? I curved it up. Right up the side. Because the body is round. We don't want to just stop abruptly. There's going to be, even though my lighting's coming from the right, there's still going to be shadow here because the bust will cast a shadow. The arm is going to cast a shadow onto that portion of the body as well. Okay. And then, we don't want to leave the bust area alone either. We treat it just like the spheres. And there's still going to be midtones as well. There is a separation between the bust. It almost looks a little triangular. Okay, Jordana and Emily, how are you doing? Okay. And underneath the collarbone, we also get the little hint of a shadow because the bone itself will stick out. That's just a little detail that we want to add in there. Okay, I think I'm going to add a little bit more shading to the bust area. I don't want it to look too empty. And now I'm going to work my way over to this arm on the right-hand side where my shadow falls to the left. Remember, the arm is just a cylinder. It's just a tube. So shadows falling to the left, highlights to the right. This is the same pattern that we're following throughout the whole body. So what do you notice in general about the body as I come towards my light source? Did I go as dark as I did on the left-hand side? What do you observe here? Okay. And that is the bell. So we will continue this tomorrow and work with the rest of the body.